Hey guys, tonight we drift down the Nile, past reeds whispering in the warm night breeze, and we float right into the oldest stories humans told about their world. You see the desert stretching endlessly, you feel the Nile lapping quietly against the boat, and you realize that for ancient Egyptians, this was more than scenery, it was the edge of the universe. Out there beyond the black horizon, they imagined only water, a swirling void called none. From that watery chaos, all things would one day be born. The air is heavy, and you squint into the darkness, trying to picture what nothing looks like. You probably won't survive this, because let's be real, floating around in primordial soup without Wi-Fi, snacks, or sunscreen isn't a winning scenario, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to drop a comment with your location and the local time, so I know exactly where in the world you're joining from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean over the side of the boat, watching ripples dance. Out of this dark water, the Egyptians believed the first mound of earth rose, like an island peeking above the surface after endless floods. They called this the Benben stone. On it, the first spark of life came into being. Some say a cosmic egg cracked open there, others claim a lotus flower unfolded at dawn. Either way, from this moment, God spilled into existence. The first was Adam, or sometimes Ra, or sometimes both, depending which temple you happen to wander into. He appeared on that lonely mound, self-created, which raises awkward questions about how exactly. Egyptians politely dodged the detail. He coughed or sneezed, and from his bodily outbursts came two more gods, Shu, the air, and Tefnut, the moisture. Historians still argue whether this was meant to be a literal sneeze, or a poetic way of saying, life is breath and water. Either way, bless you, Adam, you feel the hot desert air stir as Shu stretches his arms, holding apart the heavens and the earth. Meanwhile Tefnut drips with the life-giving dew, essential for Nile crops and probably good for your skin routine. Together they birth Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. Here's where things get dramatic. Nut and Geb cling so tightly that nothing can exist between them. So Shu pries them apart, sky arched above, earth lying below. That little cosmic act of family drama is the reason you can even breathe this story in right now, and Nut, the sky goddess, is beautiful but strange. Imagine a body studded with stars, stretched across the heavens like a human arching in an impossible yoga pose. Egyptians pictured her swallowing the sun at dusk and giving birth to it again each dawn. You think mornings are rough, but imagine literally delivering a blazing orb of fire every single day. Nut deserves all the coffee. From Geb and Nut's union came a new generation, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. But we'll save their messy soap opera for later. For now, you watch as gods multiply like cosmic cousins you didn't invite to dinner. They represent forces Egyptians couldn't control: storms, fertility, death, rebirth. Life itself was explained by these personalities. And the quirky bit? Some Egyptians genuinely believed the first mound of creation wasn't just myth, it was sitting inside their temple courtyards, symbolized by pyramidal stones or obelisks. Even today, you see echoes of that shape rising in architecture worldwide. That awkward Washington Monument in D.C.? Yep, think of it as an accidental throwback to the Benben stone. Now, as you gaze across the water, you notice frogs croaking in the marsh. They remind you of Hecate, the frog goddess of fertility, who hopped right out of Egypt's swampy imagination. In the creation stories, frogs and even snakes sometimes joined the party, symbolizing life crawling out of chaos. It sounds bizarre, but think about it. When the Nile flooded, frogs and fish suddenly appeared everywhere, so of course they felt magical. Still, Egypt never settled on one tidy creation myth. Some cities swore their god did it all. Heliopolis claimed Adam, Hermopolis bragged about their sacred Ogdoad, a team of 8 primeval frog and snake gods, while Memphis insisted Ta simply thought the world into being. Like an ancient TED talk on manifestation. Historians still argue whether these were competing religious dogmas or just local pride contests. You can picture the priests side-eyeing each other across the desert, muttering, "Our God did it better." The thing you can't ignore is how the Egyptians felt about water. For them, none wasn't just chaos, it was ever-present. Every year, the Nile flooded, swallowing fields, then receded, leaving fertile soil behind. That cycle mirrored creation itself: chaos, emergence, renewal. You, standing in the moonlight, feel that rhythm in your bones, the fear of drowning, the relief of rebirth, the hope of harvest, and here's the soft joke of it all: Egyptians essentially said the universe began with a sneeze. A frog chorus, or divine brainstorming. Compared to modern science's Big Bang, their theories might sound silly, but they answered the same deep question: where did it all begin? You lean back, hearing the fan hum in your room, and realize they weren't so far off. Everything from chaos, everything reborn, everything fragile, like the ripples lapping against your boat. You're still drifting on that Nile barge, the stars overhead mirrored perfectly in the black water below, when suddenly a light swells on the horizon. It's not the sleepy glow of your phone screen, nope, it's the blazing disk of Ra, the sun god himself, climbing up from the east in his celestial boat. Egyptians believed Ra wasn't just the sun, he was the sun. Every dawn he was reborn, every noon he blazed at his strongest, and every dusk he aged and slipped into the underworld. Imagine working a 24-hour shift every single day for eternity, no paid time off, no sick leave. You probably wouldn't survive that HR arrangement. His barge slices across the sky, crewed by other gods and spirits. You can almost hear the splash of divine oars, the flapping of protective deities fending off chaos. The boat's wake is sunlight itself, shimmering gold across Egypt's deserts and farmlands. Farmers look up and sigh in relief, because without this glowing captain, no crops would grow, no bread would bake, no beer would bubble. Mainstream historical fact: temples all across Egypt aligned their architecture with Ra's journey, from east-facing pylons to shafts of light that illuminated sanctuaries only on solstices. This wasn't coincidence, it was a deliberate love letter to the sun, but Ra's job isn't just shine and repeat. Each night, he sails underground through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and faces the chaos serpent Apep. Picture the biggest, crankiest anaconda you've ever seen, only with supernatural powers and a vendetta against daylight. Every night is a cosmic cage match, Ra and his crew battling the serpent, hacking away with spears, while magicians on Earth mutter protective spells to help. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic of natural cycles, like storms, eclipses, or nightfall, or whether Egyptians literally believed a snake could swallow the sun if left unchecked. Either way, it explains why people prayed harder on cloudy days. You tilt your head, squinting at Ra's blazing crown, the solar disk encircled by a cobra, called the Urias. It wasn't just decorative, it spat fire at enemies. Imagine walking into a job interview with a flaming snake tiara, that's power dressing. And yet, despite all that swagger, Ra had his insecurities. Egyptians whispered that he grew old, his bones silver, his flesh gold, his hair lapis lazuli. Once upon a time, when humans plotted rebellion, Ra unleashed his daughter Sekhmet to punish them. Spoiler, she went overboard. But we'll get to that hangover later. Right now, you marvel at Ra's daily commute. He's not alone. Sia, the god of perception, keeps watch, Hu, the god of command, speaks reality into being, and Heka, the magic itself, powers the voyage. If you've ever pulled an all-nighter and needed 3 different apps, 2 cups of coffee, and pure luck just to survive, you get the vibe. Ra was only as strong as his cosmic crew. Quirky tidbit: some myths say Ra's tears created humankind. Yes, your entire species might just be the result of divine eye-watering. That awkward moment when someone asks, where do humans come from? And the answer is, well, the sun god cried after a long day. You can almost picture him muttering, ugh, allergies, and boom, civilization, but Ra wasn't forever supreme. Over time, Egyptians fused him with other deities, harmonious Ra. King of gods, Ra Horikti, combining solar and falcon power. Think of it like superhero crossovers, except instead of the Avengers, it was priests in Thebes and Heliopolis one-upping each other with theology. Historians still argue whether these fusions were genuine beliefs or just political maneuvers. After all, nothing says support our dynasty like claiming your local god is secretly the same as the universal sun. You imagine standing at Karnak temple during dawn. The massive pylons glow, shadows stretching long and thin. Priests chant hymns, incense curls in the air, and the first ray of sunlight pierces the sanctuary, striking a statue of Ra. The people cheer, reassured once more that the god still sails, still shines, still wins his nightly fight. It's like watching your favorite TV show renewed for another season. Relief, but also a little anxiety, because you know the story has to repeat tomorrow, and yet, Ra wasn't untouchable. Remember Isis? Clever goddess, mother of Horus? She once tricked Ra into revealing his secret name, the ultimate password, the God mode cheat code. She created a magical snake that bit him, then offered the cure only if he confessed his hidden identity. Imagine phishing your boss with a fake email just to grab their login. Egyptians told it as a warning, even the sun needed allies, and even the mightiest could be vulnerable. By now, the barge has sailed overhead, the heat presses on your skin, and you think about Ra's age. Egyptians worried too, would he eventually grow too old to rise? Would chaos win? The pyramids, the temples, the rituals, they were all insurance policies against cosmic burnout. Quirky side note, some scholars believe Ra's daily journey inspired not only Egyptian religion but also their calendar, dividing time into cycles of light and dark, order and disorder. The fan hum in your room mimics the oars of Ra's crew, steady, rhythmic, endless. You realize you're part of this same cycle, morning wake up. Noon rush, evening rest. Maybe you don't fight giant serpents, unless you count deadlines, but the repetition feels just as eternal. You lie back, letting the golden glow soften in your imagination, the river carrying you on into more stories. The light of Ra drifts westward, sinking toward the horizon, and in the long shadows cast over the Nile you stumble upon one of Egypt's most famous tales, a divine soap opera that would make any modern drama writer jealous. This is the story of Isis and Osiris, two siblings, two lovers, and two rulers whose tale mixes romance, tragedy, and just enough magical corpse reassembly to keep you awake at night. You step into the lush fields of the Nile Delta, where Osiris, tall and regal, once ruled as king. He wasn't just a god, he was the god of civilization, agriculture, and the promise of life after death. Under his reign, Egyptians imagined the land blossomed, the people thrived, and wine flowed almost as freely as Nile water. Beside him was Isis, his sister wife, a goddess of magic, healing, and protective motherhood. Imagine them as the ancient power couple everyone envied, the Beyoncé and Jay-Z of divine dynasties. But, of course, no good story survives without a jealous sibling. Enter Set, their brother, god of chaos, desert storms, and general bad vibes. Set resented Osiris's popularity, fuming in his red desert lair while the fertile Nile Valley sang Osiris's praises. Mainstream historical fact, Egyptian art often painted Set with strange features, part donkey, part aardvark, part mystery animal. Scholars still debate. Historians still argue whether Set's head represents a real creature now extinct or a symbolic mashup of menace. Either way, you wouldn't want him on your party guest list. One evening, Set invites Osiris to a banquet. The wine flows, the laughter rings, and Set unveils a gorgeous wooden chest, ornate, polished, sized perfectly for a human body. He declares, whoever fits inside can keep it. Naturally, Osiris, ever the sport, lies down to try. The lid slams, nails hammer, molten lead seals. Set and his conspirators toss the chest into the Nile, where it drifts away into darkness. You probably won't survive this either, trapped in a lead-lined coffin at the bottom of the river, but at least you'd be famous. Isis, upon hearing of her husband's fate, sets out on a quest that takes her across Egypt and beyond. She finds the chest lodged in a tree trunk, the trunk now part of a palace pillar in Byblos. With patience and cunning, she reclaims it and brings Osiris back. For a brief moment, they reunite, love defying death. But Set isn't done. He seizes Osiris's body again, this time hacking it into 14 pieces and scattering them across Egypt like some grim scavenger hunt. Here comes the quirky tidbit: Isis, with her sister Nephthys, tracks down every single piece. Except one. The phallus, according to myth, was eaten by a fish in the Nile. Egyptians didn't shy away from awkward detail. Isis, not deterred, crafts a replacement part out of gold or clay, depending on the version, and reassembles Osiris's body. With spells, lamentations, and maybe the ancient equivalent of duct tape, she resurrects him long enough to conceive their son, Horus. It's both touching and surreal, a romance that survives betrayal, murder, dismemberment, and a bit of creative prosthetics. Osiris, however, cannot stay in the realm of the living. He descends into the underworld, becoming Lord of the Dead, Judge of Souls, and the eternal symbol of resurrection. From that point on, every Egyptian who hoped for life after death looked to Osiris as their example. Mainstream fact: tomb paintings and funerary texts often depicted the deceased merging with Osiris, their faces painted green like his, symbolizing rebirth. Meanwhile, Isis raises Horus in secrecy, hiding in marshes, warding off scorpions, nursing him with divine milk until he grows strong enough to face Set. You imagine her hunched over her infant, weaving spells, whispering lullabies that double as protection charms. Mothers in ancient Egypt prayed to Isis for the same shield over their own children, believing she understood both love and loss more deeply than any other goddess. Historians still argue how much of this myth reflects real political events. Some suggest it mirrors the unification struggles between Upper and Lower Egypt, with Osiris as fertile valley, Set as barren desert, and Horus as the new king who restores balance. Others see it as a cycle of nature allegory: Osiris the seed, buried, cut apart, and reborn through Horus as the new crop each year. You, listening in the dim hum of your fan, see the story play out like shadows on temple walls. You picture the priests of Abydos reenacting Osiris's passion every year, mourning his death, celebrating his resurrection. Crowds wept, cheered, feasted, and carried little models of boats, remembering how the Nile carried his coffin. For them, this wasn't just a bedtime story, it was a reassurance that death was not the end, and you smile at the sly joke in it all. Humans think they invented soap operas, but the Egyptians had love triangles, betrayal, dramatic resurrections, and magical prosthetics thousands of years earlier. Compared to Isis and Osiris, your Netflix dramas look tame. The night deepens, the stars stretch overhead, and you follow Horus, child of resurrection, toward his destined clash with Set, the chaos bringer. The marshes are still damp under your feet when you hear thunder rumbling across the desert. The Nile reeds bend, sand whips into your eyes, and through the storm you feel the presence of Set, god of chaos, violence, and desert storms. You've met him before, donkey-eared, snout-faced, with a body that doesn't quite match any real animal on Earth. Scholars call it the Set animal, a weird hybrid with square ears, a curved snout, and a forked tail. Historians still argue whether this was based on a long-lost species or whether Egyptians invented the design just to scream unsettling. Either way, you wouldn't swipe right on this guy. Set is the eternal foil, where Osiris brought fertility and order. Set brings barren sands, howling winds, and sudden floods. He's not just a villain though, at least, not always. Early on, Egyptians worshipped him as protector of Ra's solar barge, the muscled bouncer who speared the chaos serpent a pep every night. Imagine cheering for a guy who saves the sun, but also ruins your crops by blowing sandstorms through your village. It's complicated. You watch as Set stomps across the desert, jealous rage still fresh from Osiris's rule. His murder of Osiris wasn't just sibling rivalry, it was chaos incarnate attacking stability. Egyptians lived between fertile Nile and lifeless desert. To them, Set was that edge, both threatening and necessary. Quirky tidbit, in some regions, Egyptians actually prayed to Set for strength, especially soldiers who wanted his ferocity in battle. In the eastern desert and the oases, Set had full-on fan clubs. It's like rooting for the villain because sometimes the villain throws the best parties, but most Egyptians remembered him as the usurper. After Osiris's death, Set claimed the throne, strutting around in his odd snout glory, while Isis hid baby Horus in the papyrus swamps. You imagine Set's paranoia, scanning every shadow for his nephew. Stories say he transformed into a giant black boar to blind Horus, gouging out one of his eyes in a brutal fight. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects symbolic astronomy, the moon injured during eclipses, or if it was just a divine excuse to explain why some nights the moon looked wonky. The battles between Set and Horus drag on for years, contests of strength, cunning, even boat races. One quirky legend says they both carved boats from stone, but Horus secretly swapped his for a wooden one disguised as stone, while Set's real stone boat sank like, well, a stone. Picture divine gods bickering over boating hacks while villagers watched from the riverbanks. That's peak Egyptian humor. At one point, the gods assemble a divine tribunal to decide who should rule. They're indecisive, kind of like that one group project where no one wants to choose the leader. Isis, clever as always, disguises herself as a poor widow to trick Set into condemning himself. When he realizes, he erupts in rage, reminding you of a guy rage-quitting a video game after realizing the noob outsmarted him, and yet, even after defeat, Set wasn't erased. Pharaohs sometimes boasted of channeling Set's strength, especially in foreign wars. Mainstream fact, King Ramesses II named one of his sons after Set, Seti, which shows how deeply the chaos god still mattered. Order needs a little chaos, after all. Or life stagnates, but here's the open debate, was Set truly evil, or just misunderstood? Some Egyptologists argue later dynasties, especially after foreign invasions, demonized Set more harshly than earlier Egyptians had. Early hymns praise him as Stormbringer, Desert Guardian, and necessary counterpart to fertile Nile gods. Later myths, however, paint him as ultimate betrayer, aligning him with foreigners like the Hyksos. In other words, history might have PR-edited him into a villain. You shuffle across hot sand, hearing jackals howl in the distance, the desert wind clawing your skin. For Egyptians, Set was always lurking at the edges, like the barren wilderness beyond their villages, like the droughts that threatened harvests. He wasn't just a god to fear, but a force you had to live with, and you smirk at the thought. Every family has that one sibling who ruins dinner parties, picks fights, and somehow still gets invited. The Egyptians just happened to put theirs in charge of storms, deserts, and world chaos. Good luck with that. The sky above flickers with lightning, but on the horizon you see wings spreading, falcon wings. Horus is growing, preparing to face Set once more, and the desert will tremble when they clash. The storm clears, and in its wake you see a falcon slicing across the dawn sky. The air shivers with its wings, sharp and sure, and you realize you're staring at Horus, the falcon god, the avenger of his father, the divine symbol of kingship in Egypt. He's no longer the hidden infant in the marshes, now he's grown, talons ready, eyes gleaming like twin suns. One eye burns with solar fire, the other glows with lunar calm. And those eyes will soon play a very strange role in your bedtime story. Horus's life is one long training montage. Raised by Isis in secret, he's taught magic, cunning, and combat. Picture the ancient equivalent of Karate Kid, except instead of waxing cars, he's dodging crocodiles and practicing spear throws in papyrus swamps. You see him crouch, breathing steady, the reeds rustling with every lesson, until one day Isis whispers, "It's time." His destiny? To face Set, the usurper. Their rivalry erupts in a string of contests, and you're dragged right into the arena. The gods gather as judges, the Nile serves as battleground, and the people wait for the outcome that will decide who sits on Egypt's throne. Mainstream historical fact: the struggle of Horus and Set was so central that Egyptian kingship itself became linked with Horus. Pharaohs styled themselves as the living Horus, their names inscribed inside a falcon's frame called a serek. Every crown bore falcon imagery, reminding people that the ruler was the heir of Horus. But the battles weren't clean. One myth tells of a violent clash where Set tears out Horus's left eye. The injury isn't fatal, but the loss becomes legendary. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, steps in, magically restoring it. From then on, the eye of Horus became a sacred symbol of protection, health, and wholeness. Quirky tidbit: Egyptians broke the eye into 6 mathematical parts, each fraction representing senses like sight, smell, or taste. It's like inventing a math problem based on your favorite superhero's face. You can almost trace the eye painted on amulets, on tomb walls, on boat prows. Sailors wore it, mothers hung it near cradles, even mummies had it painted on their wrappings to guard them in the afterlife. And here's the spooky bit: archaeologists say some pilots in World War II wore Eye of Horus charms for luck, thousands of years later. Apparently, divine branding has good staying power. Meanwhile, Set doesn't hold back either. Stories say he gouged, tricked, and even humiliated Horus in ways that scribes carefully tiptoed around but still managed to hint at. Think divine slapstick comedy, but with a PG-13 rating. The gods, sitting in judgment, debated endlessly. Historians still argue whether these myths reflected real dynastic struggles, with Horus symbolizing legitimate rulers of Upper Egypt and Set standing for chaotic desert powers of Lower Egypt. The mythology may have been propaganda wrapped in feathers, still, Horus's victory was inevitable. In one myth, he finally pins Set beneath his spear, ready to strike. But the tribunal of gods intervenes, and instead of death, Set is stripped of his power. Horus becomes rightful king, and his rule sets the model for all pharaohs to come. Every coronation echoed this cosmic courtroom, every royal crown declared, Horus wins again. You stand in Karnak Temple, imagining the falcon soaring above the towering pylons, sunlight catching on golden statues. Priests chant his name, peasants bow, and the air smells of incense. To the Egyptians, this wasn't just a story, it was political theology. The king was Horus made flesh, falcon eyes watching the land, claws ready to strike against chaos. And the eye of Horus? It wasn't just a trinket. In funerary rituals, it represented restoration, life reborn after injury. Coffins painted it over the face of the deceased so the dead could see in the afterlife. Imagine being so iconic that your eyeball becomes one of the most copied designs in history. Quirky side thought: the symbol still pops up today, in jewelry shops, tattoos, or conspiracy theories linking it to the all-seeing eye. You chuckle, realizing ancient Egyptians would probably roll their eyes, pun intended, at how we've overcomplicated their sacred falcon emblem, and yet, the deeper truth remains. Horus's triumph reassured Egyptians that chaos could be defeated. That rightful order, Ma'at, would return. Every time the Nile flooded, every time a new king ascended, they felt the echo of Horus's battles. You hear the falcon's cry overhead, piercing, proud, and eternal, the desert hushes. Set retreats into shadows. And you, guided by falcon wings, follow Horus into a temple chamber where jackal-headed Anubis waits by the embalming table. Another god, another mystery, another chapter of this endless mythic night. The falcon's cry fades, and the sound that replaces it is softer, stranger, cloth rustling, jars clinking, the low hum of chants in a darkened chamber. You shuffle inside, and the smell of resin, myrrh, and something sharp, almost medicinal, fills your nose. A flickering lamp reveals a tall figure with the head of a jackal, eyes gleaming gold in the gloom. This is Anubis, guardian of mummification, lord of cemeteries, and the one god you definitely want handling your afterlife paperwork. He's calm, precise, methodical, think ancient Egypt's most obsessive-compulsive embalmer. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptians believed preserving the body was essential, because the Ka, life force, needed a recognizable home in the afterlife. That's why Anubis became so important. He guided the dead through that fragile transition between flesh and eternity. You lie down on the slab, cold linen against your skin, while his steady hands prepare you for immortality. And you probably won't survive this procedure, because mummification involved removing organs, drying your body with natron, and wrapping you tighter than a burrito. Not exactly spa treatment, but Anubis works with reverence. He invented the rites, according to myth, when he embalmed Osiris himself. After Set hacked Osiris to pieces, remember, Isis and Nephthys gathered them back. Anubis carefully wrapped the god, anointing him, whispering sacred words. From then on, every mummy echoed that first act of divine embalming. Quirky tidbit: some priests performing mummification wore jackal masks to literally embody Anubis while they worked. Imagine walking into a funeral home and seeing someone in a jackal head calmly sewing up grandma. That's commitment. The embalming tent is full of tools, obsidian blades to make tiny incisions, hooked rods to pull the brain out through the nose, yes, really, canopic jars shaped like protective gods to hold lungs, liver, stomach, intestines. Historians still argue whether Egyptians truly thought the brain was useless or whether its absence simply didn't matter for eternal life. Either way, the heart stayed put, because it was considered the seat of thought, memory, and morality. You place your hand over your chest, suddenly grateful for that old ticker. Anubis doesn't just wrap you and walk away, he guides you further, into the halls of judgment. Picture a massive set of scales, gleaming in torchlight. On one side, your heart. On the other, the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance. If your heart weighs heavier than the feather, full of lies, cruelty, or just bad vibes, it gets tossed to Ammit, the devourer, part crocodile, part lion, part hippo. And just like that, no afterlife for you. Talk about harsh grading, but if your heart balances, Anubis smiles, and you pass into Osiris's lush realm of reeds, a paradise where the Nile never fails, fields are always green, and beer mugs never run dry. Mainstream fact: tomb texts often show Anubis standing by the scales, steadying the balance, ensuring fairness. He wasn't your executioner, he was the quiet accountant making sure the math checked out. The quirky part: archaeologists have found countless amulets shaped like tiny jackals placed on mummies, as if one Anubis wasn't enough. Double or triple the jackals for extra coverage. You'd think of it as buying extended warranty on your soul. Yet Anubis's role wasn't always clear-cut. Some traditions gave Osiris the bigger spotlight in funerary rituals, while Anubis became more of an assistant. Historians still argue whether Anubis was demoted over time, an early ruler of the dead replaced by Osiris's rising popularity. In some temples, Anubis is chief judge, in others, just a guide. The hierarchy is hazy, like a celestial office politics drama. You linger in the embalming hall, watching priests pour warm resin over wrappings, sealing the body. The air is heavy, almost suffocating, yet serene. Outside, mourners wail, but inside, Anubis is steady, unhurried, the embodiment of ritual precision. You realize that for Egyptians, death wasn't chaos. It was order, linen folded perfectly, prayers whispered rhythmically, every step a rehearsal for eternity, and you grin at the odd comfort in it all. While most cultures feared death as wild and uncontrollable, the Egyptians treated it like a logistics problem. As long as Anubis had his checklists and jars, you were fine, the last lamp flickers, and the jackal-headed figure nods, leading you toward a doorway carved with hieroglyphs. Beyond it glimmers moonlight and the sound of quills scratching parchment. The ibis-headed scribe, Thoth, is waiting, pen in hand, ready to record every secret of gods and men. The jackal fades into shadow, and now the scratching of a reed pen fills your ears. You step into a chamber where the walls glow faintly with moonlight filtering through cracks in the stone. There he sits, a tall figure with the head of an ibis, long curved beak dipping over papyrus, his hand moving endlessly across the surface with an elegance that makes even your messy grocery lists feel like a personal insult. This is Thoth, god of wisdom, writing, and the keeper of divine records. If the universe had an overworked secretary who also moonlighted as a magician, it would be him. You peer closer, and the room feels like a library, scrolls stacked floor to ceiling, ink jars lined up like soldiers. The air full of dust and papyrus fibers that itch your throat. Historical fact: Egyptians credited Thoth with inventing writing itself, the sacred hieroglyphs carved into tomb walls and temple gates. Without him, no one would have been keeping track of crops, taxes, or Pharaoh's shopping lists. And you probably wouldn't survive trying to decipher hieroglyphs on your own. Imagine trying to read a story where half the alphabet is birds staring at you judgmentally. But Thoth's role went way beyond scribbles. Myth says he spoke the words that helped Isis reassemble Osiris's body, uttering spells that stitched flesh and bone back together. Quirky tidbit: in some versions of Egyptian magic, simply pronouncing Thoth's name gave you instant credibility, like citing Wikipedia in an ancient debate, except people actually respected it. You can almost hear him chuckle softly, dipping his pen again, as if he's writing your presence here into the eternal record. He wasn't just about paperwork, though. He also served as a mediator, balancing God's quarrels with calm logic. When Ra grew weary of ruling, Thoth eased him into retirement, helping him ascend into the heavens as the sun itself. When Sekhmet went berserk, remember, spilling blood across the Nile, Thoth whispered and negotiated, making sure the chaos didn't wipe everyone out. Historians still argue whether his role as mediator meant he was truly neutral, or whether he leaned subtly toward order, nudging cosmic scales in favor of Ma'at. Either way, he's the reason the whole divine soap opera didn't collapse by season 2. You notice he wears a crescent moon crown, glowing faintly. He's tied to lunar cycles, and Egyptians track time through his rhythms. Fact again: the very Egyptian calendar that organized farming and festivals was linked to Thoth's lunar measurements. Imagine depending on this ibis-headed workaholic to tell you when to plant wheat, when to pay taxes, and when to throw the year's biggest beer festival. No pressure. Thoth, another oddity: in Hermopolis, his main cult center, people also worshipped baboons as sacred to him. Archaeologists have dug up hundreds of mummified baboons offered to Thoth, which is adorable until you realize baboons can and will bite your face off. Still, Egyptians imagined them sitting politely in courtrooms, raising their paws to greet the rising sun. You glance at a carving on the wall, little baboons with round faces, lined up like jurors, and wonder how seriously anyone took their verdicts, but Thoth's pen scratches on, steady and relentless. He's recording not only your actions but your thoughts. Every hesitation, every moment of awe. That's why he was so vital in the weighing of the heart. Anubis did the measuring, but Thoth was the scribe, the impartial recorder who couldn't be bribed. You squirm slightly under that gaze. Even a tiny lie about brushing your teeth last night might already be inked into his scroll, yet he isn't cruel. His face, though avian, radiates calm patience. He knows mortals stumble. What matters is whether you strive for truth, for balance. Historians still argue whether Egyptians saw him more as a god of learning or as a cosmic judge. The evidence is split. Temple inscriptions praise his wisdom, while funerary texts place him firmly in the courtroom of the dead. Perhaps, like any good teacher, he was both. The chamber quiets. You notice a pile of papyrus rolls sealed with wax, labeled in hieroglyphs you can't quite decode. Maybe one of them is your story, waiting for its ending. The air smells of lamp oil and faint honey, and your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the rhythmic scrape of pen on parchment. Then, Thoth glances up. His golden eyes glimmer, and with a slight tilt of his head, he gestures toward another door. You realize he's finished writing for now. Your record is complete, at least for this moment. The sound of papyrus fades as you shuffle through the doorway. Beyond lies a place filled with shadows and stormy winds, where a great black sky churns like an endless desert storm. Set, the god of chaos, is waiting there, and unlike Thoth, he doesn't plan to play fair. The calm scratching of Thoth's pen dissolves behind you, and suddenly you're hit with a blast of hot, swirling air. Sand crunches beneath your sandals, but when you look down, it isn't the soft golden desert you expect, it's darker, grittier, almost volcanic. The horizon flickers with red lightning. The air hums with menace, like standing too close to a malfunctioning power line. You pull your cloak tighter as a figure emerges, broad shoulders, squared jaw, and the unmistakable head of. Well, scholars still debate this one. Some say it's an aardvark, others an antelope, still others claim it's some hybrid beast we've long forgotten. Whatever it is, the snout curves oddly, the ears stand tall. And the eyes glow with a storm's fury. This is Set, Lord of Chaos, Desert, and Disorder. You probably won't survive being in his mood swings. Mainstream fact, Set was both feared and respected in Egypt. He murdered his brother Osiris, yes, the same one Anubis carefully embalmed, and scattered his body across the Nile. Not exactly a model sibling. But at the same time, he defended Ra on his nightly journey through the underworld, spearing the serpent Apophis so the sun could rise again. The Egyptians had a love-hate relationship with him. He was necessary chaos, the thunderstorm that also watered crops. You trudge across the dark sand, and Set circles you, his weapon, a massive scepter. Dragging lines in the dirt. He laughs, low and harsh, and the ground trembles. Quirky tidbit, in some temples, pharaohs proudly associated themselves with Set, seeing him as a symbol of raw strength and military power. For a while, especially in the 19th dynasty, worship of Set was not only normal but politically useful. But later, as foreign invasions and instability grew, he became demonized, painted as a villain. Historians still argue whether Set was ever intended as purely evil, or whether later priests simply needed a scapegoat. The storm around you grows. You squint against the sand, but you see flashes, Osiris's green body torn apart, Isis frantically searching the Nile, Horus rising to avenge his father. The most famous battle is etched in the thunder, Horus versus Set, nephew against uncle, order against chaos. Some versions say Horus gouged out Set's eye, others that Set ripped off Horus's genitals. Egyptian mythology didn't pull its punches. You wince, who really won that fight? Historians still argue whether the myths ended with Horus triumphant or with some uneasy truce. The texts vary, like rival storytellers refusing to agree on who got the last punch, but you can't help noticing Set isn't all menace. He was the god of deserts and foreigners, of the spaces outside Egypt's fertile Nile Valley. In a way, he represented everything unfamiliar and uncomfortable. To Egyptians, that was terrifying. To you, standing here, it feels eerily familiar. Chaos is uncomfortable, yes, but also the reason new possibilities exist. No chaos, no change. No Set, no sunrise. A bolt of lightning cracks the sand into glass at your feet. Set snarls, then smirks, as if daring you to call him a villain. His breath smells like hot stone, his voice like gravel grinding. You want eternity? He seems to ask. Then you'll need me, too. And that's the paradox, Egyptians cursed him for Osiris's murder, yet invoked him for protection. Without Set standing guard on Ra's solar boat, Apophis might have devoured the sun. Talk about an awkward resume, destroyer of brother, savior of universe, your cloak whips violently in the wind, and you clutch it tighter. You're reminded of how Egyptians sometimes made offerings to Set during sandstorms, pleading for his mercy. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found small carvings of strange Set animals, long snouts, forked tails, squared-off ears, left as talismans. No one's entirely sure what animal it was supposed to be. Historians still argue whether it was based on a real creature or just a mythical composite. Either way, it looks like something you'd avoid at the zoo. The storm peaks and then softens. Set lowers his scepter and narrows his glowing eyes. The desert grows quiet, the sky fading from red to dark indigo. He isn't gone, you sense he never truly goes, but he recedes into the horizon, muttering like a storm cloud drifting away. You breathe easier, though your ears still ring from the thunder, and then, cutting through the silence, a new sound rises, women's laughter, gentle and lilting, like water flowing over smooth stones. The scent of lotus flowers drifts on the breeze, sweet and calming. Ahead, shimmering in the distance, figures dance gracefully in white linen, their arms raised, their hips swaying like reeds in the Nile. Hathor waits, goddess of love, joy, and music, ready to pull you out of Set's storm and into something infinitely softer. The stormy desert hushes, and in its place comes the soft strum of a harp, so delicate you almost miss it under the rustle of reeds. The air is no longer full of grit and lightning but scented with honey, milk, and sweet lotus blossoms. You step forward, and the horizon blooms into golden light, warm and playful. There she is, Hathor, her face radiant, framed by a headdress of cow horns cradling a sun disk. Some statues show her as a gentle cow herself, eyes wide, hide gleaming, standing in lush pastures. Either way, she's the goddess of love, beauty, and joy, and compared to Set's desert tantrum, this feels like stumbling into a spa commercial. She greets you not with thunder but with laughter. The kind that makes your shoulders drop and your stomach loosen. Mainstream fact: Hathor was one of Egypt's most beloved deities, worshipped across towns and villages for centuries. She presided over music, dance, fertility, and even drunken celebration. You can almost hear tambourines and sistrums shaking in rhythm, her festivals rolling with songs and gallons of beer. And yes, you probably won't survive the hangover from one of those legendary Hathor feasts. Ancient texts describe priests brewing red beer dyed with pomegranate juice and handing it out until worshippers swayed, sang, and forgot their troubles, but Hathor isn't only about merriment. In myth, she has a dangerous flip side. Quirky tidbit: she was the one Ra sent to punish humanity when they plotted against him. Transformed into the lioness Sekhmet, she tore through villages, her thirst for blood unstoppable, until tricked into drinking vats of beer dyed red. She staggered, drunk, and softened back into Hathor's gentler form. Imagine humanity saved not by courage, but by what was essentially the world's deadliest keg party. Historians still argue whether Hathor and Sekhmet were always understood as two sides of the same goddess or whether priests later merged their stories to keep mythology neat and tidy. You wander into her temple, the great sanctuary at Dendra. Sunlight pours down the painted columns, each one carved with her smiling face. Archaeological fact: the ceiling of Dendra's Hathor temple preserves the famous zodiac, one of the earliest celestial maps, showing constellations in swirling detail. Standing beneath it, you feel the same awe Egyptians must have felt, like she offered not only joy in daily life but cosmic guidance as well. Her laughter grows louder, joined by drums and voices. Priests and priestesses whirl in white linen, their feet bare, their movements hypnotic. You notice they shake a sacred instrument, the sistrum, shaped like a rattle with Hathor's head engraved at the top. The jingling metal rings were thought to banish evil and invite her presence. You imagine slipping one into your modern playlist and wonder how long before your neighbors complained, and yet, behind the music, there's depth. Hathor cared for the dead, too, guiding souls through the underworld with gentleness. In some tomb paintings, she emerges from a mountain as a cow, extending her hand, or hoof, to welcome the deceased. That contrast, joyful goddess of dance and solemn comforter of souls, made her indispensable. Historians still argue whether she was primarily a fertility deity later expanded into funerary roles, or whether she was always meant to straddle both worlds. You close your eyes and sway with the rhythm, feeling her presence lighten your bones. The desert storm of Set seems far away now. Instead, the fields are green, the sky clear, the Nile sparkling under golden sun. You can hear cattle lowing softly, a reminder of Hathor's nurturing aspect. Milk, honey, song, all things sustaining body and spirit. A priestess leans close and whispers that Hathor is sometimes called the mistress of the West, greeting souls as they journey toward the afterlife. Another tells you she is Lady of Drunkenness, which feels like a title both glamorous and slightly ominous. You laugh softly, reminded that gods don't have to fit into neat boxes. They can be contradictions, just like people. The music fades to a hum. Hathor lifts her hand, palm out, eyes kind but serious. She gestures toward the horizon where the Nile winds endlessly, fertile banks stretching wide. Crops grow tall, wheat sways golden, and in the distance you see a man with the head of a goose, or sometimes just a smiling human, guiding farmers, blessing fields. This is Geb, the earth itself, waiting for you to walk the soil he embodies. The laughter and music of Hathor fade behind you as you step onto solid earth, cool under your feet, the fertile Nile valley stretching in every direction. Here stands Geb, the earth god, reclining beneath a sky that seems impossibly blue, green fields spreading endlessly around him. His body is human, but his skin is painted dark green, the color of life, vegetation, and the promise of harvest. You notice birds perched along his shoulders and vines curling around his fingers, like he's literally part of the land he governs. Mainstream fact: Geb was considered the father of snakes, the earth itself, and the source of fertility, and he fathered the major gods Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys with Nut, the sky goddess. You probably wouldn't survive a hug from him, you'd be flattened under cosmic gravity. Geb laughs, a low, rumbling sound like earthquakes and rivers merging, and you realize he's not just a passive deity. He actively supports life, holds the soil together, allows crops to grow, and keeps chaos from consuming villages. Quirky tidbit: some texts describe him as the source of earthquakes, which might be why Egyptians avoided dancing too wildly on his temples. Historians still argue whether these accounts of trembling earth were literal observations or metaphorical warnings about respecting nature. Either way, you tiptoe just a bit. Nut, the sky goddess, arches gracefully above him. Stars hang from her fingers like tiny lanterns, and every night she swallows the sun only to birth it again the next morning. Together, Nut and Geb frame the cosmos, the fertile land below and the protective sky above. You notice their dance is slow, eternal, and perfectly balanced. This is Ma'at in motion, order woven through life, death, and the very air you breathe. Walking among fields of grain, you notice farmers leaving small offerings of bread and beer at Geb's altars, asking for abundant harvests. Mainstream fact: Egyptians associated natural cycles, flooding of the Nile, planting, harvesting, with Geb's favor. Without him, soil would fail, crops would wither, and life as they knew it would collapse. You glance down at your own hands and realize the touch of soil beneath your fingers connects you to this ancient system of reverence. Quirky tidbit: in some myths, Geb was depicted laughing so hard that earthquakes resulted, which is both terrifying and oddly relatable. Imagine cracking a joke so powerful it cracks the ground beneath you, every stand-up comedian's dream. Or nightmare. Historians still debate whether these descriptions are literal myth or symbolic storytelling, meant to explain seismic activity along the Nile Valley. You walk past grazing cattle, golden wheat swaying like ocean waves, and feel the pulse of the earth. It's rhythmical, grounding, and strangely calming. You can almost hear Geb whispering to the farmers, "Plant here, water there, respect the balance." He is life, patience, and stability, the quiet counterpart to the dramatic storms of Set and the fiery chariot of Ra. Nearby, you see the footprint of a god-sized crocodile in the mud, a reminder of Sobek, the Nile god, lurking in watery places. But you ignore him for now. Focused on the earth beneath your feet, listening to Geb's slow, deep breathing, feeling the heartbeat of the planet beneath your palms. As the sun lowers, casting long shadows across fields, you notice the balance between sky and earth, light and shadow, growth and decay. Geb doesn't just sit there, he is the framework upon which everything lives. You kneel, pressing your hand into the warm soil, imagining the roots of wheat, papyrus, and flax weaving around your fingers. This is fertility, patience, and life as the Egyptians understood it, a delicate, continuous web of nourishment, power, and magic. The wind carries the scent of fresh mud and ripening grain, and you begin to sense the rhythm of the gods as more than stories, their forces, guiding every aspect of existence. Nut overhead stretches to meet Geb below, and you feel yourself caught between the two, earth and sky, body and spirit, life and myth. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky with bruised purples and golds, the earth beneath your feet hums with life. The soft rustle of reeds along the Nile and the distant lowing of cattle fade into something more primal, a pulse, almost musical, resonating from the river itself. You turn toward the water and see Sobek, the crocodile god, gliding smoothly along the currents. His scales shimmer with an iridescent sheen, sunlight glinting off his teeth like polished ivory. Mainstream fact: Sobek was both feared and revered by Egyptians as a god of the Nile, fertility, and military prowess, often invoked for protection against crocodiles and to ensure the river's inundation. You probably wouldn't survive a full-on Sobek tantrum, but right now, he moves with quiet authority. Sobek's presence is paradoxical, as are most Egyptian gods. He embodies life-giving waters and lurking death in the same breath. Quirky tidbit: some myths describe him as having created the Nile itself, wandering the desert and digging channels with his massive jaws so water could flow into the valley. Historians still argue whether Sobek was originally a fertility deity, a warlike protector, or a combination of both that evolved over centuries. Either way, crocodiles were treated with reverent caution. You wade into the shallows, feeling the Nile lap against your ankles. Small fish dart beneath your toes. Frogs croak in the reeds, and every ripple feels like Sobek's subtle blessing. He watches silently, jaw half submerged, as though evaluating your worthiness. In temples, priests often wore crocodile masks to honor him, and mummified crocodiles have been discovered in tombs, complete with jewelry and offerings. Imagine a giant reptile with its own luxury tomb, its peak divine indulgence. The river's rhythm seems to pulse with stories. Sobek was once allied with Horus to defeat Set, yet he could also act independently, embodying the unpredictable nature of water itself. He taught Egyptians a crucial lesson: survival depended on respect and caution. You're reminded of the practical side of mythology, the way stories explain the Nile's generosity and dangers in a single, terrifyingly elegant narrative. You notice the banks brimming with lotus flowers, floating gently. Hathor's influence lingers here, a whisper of joy in the fertile chaos Sobek represents. His waters nourish the land, allow crops to flourish, and simultaneously remind everyone that life is precarious. Every fisherman, farmer, and traveler knew the duality: give offerings to Sobek, respect his power, and you would be safe; ignore him, and the river could claim you. And yet, Sobek is surprisingly sociable in certain myths. Some texts describe him attending divine councils, mediating between gods, or assisting in battles against chaotic forces. Quirky tidbit: during one legendary myth, Sobek teamed up with Ra to pull the sun across the sky, combining crocodile strength and divine order in a single heroic effort. Historians still debate whether these accounts were poetic metaphors for seasonal floods or literal tales of godly cooperation. You trail your hand along the water's edge, feeling a connection between the river, the earth, and the gods who govern both. Sobek's gaze meets yours, and for a moment, you sense understanding. Life, like the Nile, requires balance, reverence, and a little bit of fear. Without chaos, fertility falters; without vigilance, the river turns deadly. As twilight deepens, the Nile reflects stars from Nut sky, Geb's soil beneath, and Sobek's dark silhouette moving with silent authority. You step back from the edge, sensing that you've walked through the pulse of Egypt itself, the gods, the land, and the water all intertwined in rhythms older than human memory. The night smells of lotus, mud, and the faint tang of river fish. Somewhere, a distant priest plays a sistrum, bringing Hathor's laughter back into this solemn scene. Sobek retreats under the shadowed waters, his presence lingering, a quiet reminder that life is always a negotiation between danger and bounty. The night deepens, and the Nile's pulse softens into a gentle lap against the banks. The distant laughter of Hathor fades, and you sense a shift, a presence that moves with elegance, secrecy, and an air of divinity tinged with mischief. You turn, and there she is, Batet, goddess of cats, home, protection, and, if the stories are to be believed, slight chaos wrapped in feline grace. Her form shifts fluidly between a woman with a lioness head and, more often, a domestic cat curling at the feet of worshippers. Mainstream fact: Batet was widely revered as a protective deity of households and families, often called upon to ward off evil spirits, disease, and, ironically, rats. You probably wouldn't survive a scratch from her wrath. But if you're clever, she might just curl up on your lap instead. She purrs, if that's the right word for a goddess, and you feel a wave of calm wash over you. Cats are nimble, independent, and full of surprises, much like Batet herself. Quirky tidbit: in her earlier iterations, Batet was a lioness warrior, fierce and untamed, before evolving into the gentler cat goddess. Historians still argue whether the domestic cat worship in Egypt originated because of her influence or whether she simply adopted a role in response to humans adoring cats. Either way, she embodies both the predator and the companion. You watch her move through moonlit alleys of a village, tail swishing, ears alert. Every footstep seems deliberate, a dance between stealth and purpose. Families leave offerings of milk and bread at her shrines, hoping she'll safeguard their homes from disease, vermin, or misfortune. In some grand tombs, amulets of Bastet's feline head protected the dead, a gentle reminder that the protective power of a cat could extend even into eternity. Her eyes gleam gold in the torchlight, and for a moment, you see the reflection of the entire Egyptian pantheon in them: Ra's solar flare, Hathor's laughter, Geb's fertile soil, Sobek's silent river power. Batet seems to bridge domestic life and cosmic order, reminding mortals that small guardianship matters as much as the grand cosmic struggles. Quirky side note: some tombs contained mummified cats specifically dedicated to Batet. People would literally send their cats into the afterlife to serve the goddess, or as votive offerings, a gesture that seems both adorable and slightly terrifying. Historians still argue whether these mummifications were religious devotion, political statements, or simply a reflection of pet-obsessed lifestyles. You shiver slightly, imagining rows of tiny feline mummies lined up like an army of whiskered guardians. Bastet's presence isn't passive. You see her standing on rooftops, her silhouette framed by stars, tail flicking, ears pivoting to catch every whisper of danger. She defends, she warns, she hunts, yet she also embodies joy and music. During festivals in Bubastis, people danced, sang, and celebrated the goddess with feasts, honoring both her protective and playful sides. The streets would overflow with revelers, temples ringing with sistrums and laughter. You follow her along quiet paths, where the scent of baked bread mingles with jasmine and river water. The night air carries soft mews, the faint rustle of skirts and linen, and a sense of home. She leads you past simple houses, through shadowed alleys, and toward a small courtyard where children play, cats weaving through their legs, and families gather around small fires. This is the living heart of Bastet's domain: protection, community, and quiet joy in ordinary moments. Even in the divine realm, there's a balance here. fierce and playful, guardian and entertainer, predator and nurturer. You watch Batet leap gracefully onto a rooftop, the crescent moon catching her fur, and think, maybe the gods aren't just forces to fear or revere, they're reminders of life's rhythms, chaos, and comforts, all in one. The courtyard quiets as the night deepens, and Batet curls gracefully, tail around paws, a living emblem of peace and vigilance. You feel lighter, safer, as if the goddess herself has drawn a protective circle around you. Somewhere, in the distance, the Nile whispers its eternal song, and you sense the pantheon watching, interacting, each deity a brushstroke on the endless canvas of Egypt. You step quietly from Bastet's moonlit courtyard into a wider plaza, and the air vibrates with the hum of the cosmos itself. Here is Thoth again, hovering near a tall obelisk, his ibis head silhouetted against the stars. But now he isn't writing, he's counting, measuring, balancing, orchestrating the very movements of planets, stars, and celestial cycles. Mainstream fact: Thoth was often associated with the lunar calendar, astronomy, and the measurement of time. Without him, Egyptians might never have known when to plant, harvest, or hold festivals. You probably wouldn't survive a year without his cosmic bookkeeping either. His long beak dips into a scroll that seems endless, stretching into the sky. Quirky tidbit: some myths describe Thoth as mediating disputes between gods like Horus and Set, not just recording but actively nudging outcomes. Historians still argue whether these tales portray Thoth as truly impartial or subtly favoring order and stability over chaos. Either way, his influence is undeniable. As you move closer, a shadow shifts across the obelisk. Nut, the sky goddess, stretches her star-studded body over the plaza, curving gracefully so the heavens seem to kiss the earth. You feel small beneath her expanse, a single point in the vast dance of cosmos and myth. Mainstream fact: Nut was believed to swallow the sun each evening and birth it each morning, a symbol of cyclical time and rebirth. You probably won't survive the metaphorical weight of that cosmic cycle. It's dizzying to imagine living in a world where the sun's journey is personal, nightly, and divine. Between Nut and Geb, you notice a ripple in the air. Horus soars overhead, falcon wings glinting in starlight, patrolling the balance between order and chaos. Below, Set stirs in a shadowed corner, a reminder that chaos never truly disappears. Quirky tidbit: Egyptian myths describe their battles as spanning both physical and spiritual planes, sometimes manifesting in weather, droughts, or the rise and fall of rulers. Historians still argue whether these were symbolic narratives or reflections of historical power struggles disguised as divine drama. The plaza hums with the quiet energy of the pantheon. Hathor's laughter echoes softly in the distance, Sobek's river pulse courses beneath the stones, Batet prowls rooftops, and Anubis waits patiently by shadowed archways. All are present, all aware. You realize the gods function not only as characters in stories but as metaphors for life's complexities: protection, chaos, love, death, and rebirth. You wander closer to the obelisk, running your fingers over carvings depicting every god you've encountered. There's Horus fighting Set, Isis tending Osiris, Hathor dancing, Geb reclining, Sobek gliding, and Batet perched elegantly. The carvings intertwine with celestial maps, mathematical fractions, and symbols of Ma'at. Every stroke communicates balance, conflict, and harmony. A soft wind lifts papyrus scrolls along the plaza edges. One brushes against your hand, etched with hieroglyphs describing offerings, festivals, and divine rituals. You feel an odd sense of kinship: humans, gods, and nature entwined through myth, art, and ritual. Quirky tidbit: some Egyptians believed these texts contained not just knowledge but magic. Touching them could convey blessings or curses depending on intent. Historians still debate whether this reflects religious belief or cultural storytelling, a cosmic checklist for life and afterlife. As the night deepens, the stars above seem to pulse in rhythm with Thoth's movements, Horus's wings, and Nut's endless arch. You feel simultaneously infinitesimal and fully present. caught in a web of divine interaction, cosmic cycles, and human reverence. The gods are alive here, in form and function, reminding you that mythology is never just entertainment, it's architecture for understanding existence. You take a breath, the night air thick with scents of lotus, resin, and river mud, and realize that this plaza is a crossroads of life and death, chaos and order, joy and vigilance. You step back, letting the pantheon's rhythm wash over you, each deity a note in the symphony of Egypt itself. You leave the starry plaza behind, moving toward a quieter part of the temple complex where shadows stretch long and the scent of incense thickens. The air hums with whispered prayers, the soft shuffle of sandals, and distant chimes from small bronze bells. Here, the gods feel less like myth and more like companions in a slow, unfolding story. You notice Osiris standing quietly in the corner, his skin green, crown tall, crook and flail crossed over his chest. He exudes calm authority, the ruler of the afterlife and the judge of souls. Mainstream fact: Osiris was central to Egyptian religion as the god of the dead, resurrection, and fertility. You probably won't survive a misstep in his judgment. But if you're lucky, he'll nod and let you pass. Osiris's gaze sweeps over the temple, resting momentarily on Anubis, who watches the mummies with methodical care, and Thoth, recording every detail in his endless scrolls. Quirky tidbit: some texts describe Osiris as a king so just that even the stars obeyed his command, aligning themselves perfectly in seasonal constellations. Historians still argue whether his stories were purely symbolic or based on early kings whose lives became mythologized over centuries. You move closer to a relief depicting the weighing of the heart. Anubis stands by a massive scale, heart on one side, feather of Ma'at on the other. Thoth scribbles as usual, while Osiris presides, the final arbiter. It's simultaneously terrifying and reassuring. The universe, after all, has order, and there's a method to morality, divine or human. Every heartbeat echoes through the temple like a drum, reminding you that life is measured, balanced, and sacred. Suddenly, you hear soft music, almost hypnotic, and turn to see Hathor again, dancing in a narrow corridor, tambourine jingling. Her energy is contagious, the room warm, golden, and alive. She reminds you that joy is not incidental in mythology, it's essential. Quirky tidbit: during festivals, Egyptians sometimes staged mock battles, dances, and elaborate feasts to honor the gods, blending entertainment with spiritual observance. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more about social cohesion or divine devotion, but either way, they were loud, colorful, and fun. Batet appears next, slipping silently along the walls, tail curling around the edges of stone pillars. Her gaze is protective, calm, ever watchful. You realize she embodies the domestic and the divine simultaneously, joy in the small, sacred spaces of life. Sobek, meanwhile, glides through a shadowed pool in the courtyard, reminding everyone of life's lurking dangers. Even amidst beauty and order, the temple seems alive, a nexus where all gods coexist, each occupying their domain yet influencing the others. Horus swoops through shafts of moonlight, wings glinting, a constant reminder that order must be defended. Set lingers in the distant sands beyond the temple, a shadow of potential chaos, necessary for balance. Geb and Nut arch above and below, grounding and protecting. You realize that these deities, once feared and revered, are less about terror and more about reflection. They embody forces, lessons, and contradictions. To the Egyptians, life, death, and the universe were inseparable from divine rhythm. Every heartbeat, river ripple, gust of wind, and rustling leaf is infused with their presence. And you, walking among them, begin to see the subtle architecture of belief, the way myths guide, warn, and comfort simultaneously. As the night deepens, Osiris steps forward, extending a hand. Not for judgment, but for invitation, to witness the eternal cycles of life, death, and rebirth. You take a tentative step, feeling the pulse of the Nile, the warmth of Hathor's laughter, the hush of Anubis's vigil, and the gentle nudge of Bastet's protective gaze. The temple slowly fades as you move beyond its carved stone walls, leaving behind incense smoke, golden light, and the hum of divine presence. You step into a broader landscape, where the Nile stretches wide and endless, reflecting the stars above like a mirror of Nut's sky. Geb's fertile lands ripple beneath your feet, dotted with grazing cattle and waving crops. Somewhere, Sobek's shadow glides silently beneath the water, while Batet prowls nearby, tail flicking, alert and serene. Mainstream fact: the Egyptians viewed the world as an interconnected system, where gods, humans, and nature were intertwined in an eternal dance. You probably won't survive trying to experience it all at once without becoming dizzy. But right now, it's mesmerizing. The pantheon's energy surrounds you. Horus arcs overhead, vigilant and swift, set watches from distant sands, a necessary chaos never fully gone. Hathor hums softly in the breeze, laughter carried on warm air. Anubis observes silently, every motion precise and meaningful. Thoth's gaze sweeps across the landscape, pen poised to record cosmic balances. Osiris stands tall, welcoming souls, embodying judgment, justice, and regeneration. Each deity contributes to the rhythm of the world, every action deliberate, yet flowing seamlessly with the next. You wander along the banks of the Nile, noticing the delicate interplay of life around you. Frogs croak. Fish leap, and the air smells faintly of mud, lotus, and river silt. Quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians believed these simple elements, water, soil, plants, animals, were imbued with divine essence, a reminder that the sacred often hides in the mundane. Historians still argue whether these beliefs arose from practical observation of the environment or purely religious contemplation, but either way, the reverence shaped culture. As night deepens, the sky stretches into the infinite, stars shimmering as if suspended in Nut's outstretched body. You realize each god governs not just one realm but layers of existence, their influence overlapping, blending, and correcting each other in perfect cosmic balance. Hathor's joy softens Set's chaos, Bastet's vigilance steadies Sobek's danger, Geb and Nut cradle the living and the dead alike, while Thoth records and guides, ensuring order prevails. You pause on the riverbank, dipping a hand into cool water, reflecting the moon and the gods' forms. The Nile hums softly, a lullaby older than time itself. You hear the whisper of reeds, the flutter of wings, and the soft purr of cats far in the distance. Every sound, every movement, resonates with divine presence and the subtle architecture of the Egyptian cosmos. The world feels vast, complex, yet intimately interconnected. Each god, each myth, each ritual reminds you that life, death, chaos, and joy are inseparable, woven together in patterns humans still strive to understand. You breathe deeply, feeling the warmth of Hathor, the watchfulness of Batet, the strength of Sobek, the calm of Geb, the wisdom of Thoth, the fairness of Osiris, and the subtle threat of Set. They are alive in stories, in land, in sky, and in your own heartbeat. The stars flicker softly as you lie back on the sand, gazing upward. You feel the eternal rhythm of Egypt, the pulse of the Nile, and the watchful eyes of its pantheon. Slowly, the sounds fade, the wind softens, and the world narrows to a gentle hum, the god's presence lingering, comforting, and guiding. You feel safe, enveloped in myth, history, and the steady heartbeat of an ancient civilization that understood the delicate balance of life itself. The night grows still, and the air softens around you, carrying the faint scent of lotus, river mud, and burning incense. Stars shimmer like distant candles above Nut's protective sky, their light reflecting in the quiet waters of the Nile. You lie on the sand, letting the subtle rhythm of the river seep into your bones, imagining Geb's fertile earth cradling you, Sobek's vigilant eyes watching gently from the shadows, and Bastet's quiet presence ensuring your safety. The pantheon feels close but not intrusive, like a warm, steady pulse beneath the surface of your awareness. Hathor's distant laughter drifts through the night, gentle and playful, reminding you that joy and wonder exist even amidst chaos and uncertainty. Thoth's eternal recording of cosmic balance hums quietly in your mind, a steady reminder that time and life are measured and guided by forces larger than yourself. Set's storm has faded, leaving behind the calm tension of necessary chaos, while Osiris stands as a quiet witness to life, death, and rebirth. Every god you've encountered becomes a note in a symphony that spans centuries, civilizations, and the unseen structures of the universe. You feel the stories, the myths, and the rhythms of Egyptian life settling around you like a soft blanket. The Nile whispers, the reeds sway, and the night deepens, each sound and movement carrying the weight and wonder of thousands of years. Slowly, your eyelids grow heavy, your breath aligns with the gentle pulse of the world, and the complex, vibrant tapestry of gods, humans, and nature softens into a lullaby. Here, under the protective gaze of the gods, in the eternal rhythm of life and myth, you drift. The Nile rocks you, the stars watch over you, and the pantheon fades into gentle whispers. Every heartbeat, every sigh of wind, every flicker of light guides you into calm, peaceful sleep. You are held, understood, and carried by stories older than memory, floating on the soft, eternal current of Egyptian eternity.